Welcome to the next round of reviews over video game promotional cards. This time I am covering the cards from the GX era, which for the most part had better regional parity than those from the Duel Monsters era. Speaking of which, I actually have a correction to make. That exchange has seen competitive play since it can be used to gain information on the opponent's hand and even take out important hand traps, which could otherwise stop your combo. I've gone on record saying that Gataxian Probe would still see competitive play without the card draw, and Exchange does give the same information. If you can put yourself in a position that you have one card in hand, especially one which is not particularly useful, the symmetric effect can be bent into your favor. So special thanks to Surfing Pikachu for that insight. Now, onto the cards. The first game up is GX Duel Academy. A game which I remember playing, but I must have gotten it secondhand, since I have never seen one of these cards. There's a strong Jaden theme, starting with Elemental Hero Necroshade, which helps to discount higher level Elemental Hero monsters. At the time of release, the only two targets were Elemental Hero Blade Edge and, get this, Elemental Hero Necroshade. Neither of those cards are particularly good, and even the release of Elemental Hero Neos in the same year did not do much for the card. Wing Kuriboh is flavorful, and an improvement over the hand trap in my opinion. It is such a nice handoff from the King of Games to the eventual Supreme King. The card is almost useful too, buying a turn when it gets destroyed. Of course, there is Transcendent Wings and Wing Kuriboh level 10 as support, but I think the card on its own is decent enough for a cube draft. Last for Jaden's cards is Hero Ring, which is not another piece of hero jewelry like Hero Metal. The odd card name is the result of regionalization to remove religious connotations from the Japanese name, Hero's Halo, which is far more fitting for the card, as far as artwork and effect. This is an equip trap, which already makes it a little unusual. It is restricted to warriors with 1500 attack or less and allows the monster to roleplay as an obnoxious Celtic guard, although doing a bit better job of it, as it does prevent the attacks entirely instead of body blocking. Ultimate Masters World Championship Tournament 2006 moves the focus from Jaden to Professor Banner, specifically as Amniel when he used a different dimension deck. All three monsters gain attack based on the number of banished cards. None of these cards are as good as Grin Maju to Aiza, but Golden Homunculus is not that bad, gaining 300 attack and defense for each banished card, but on a 1 tribute monster. Helios the Primordial Sun does not require a tribute, but only gains 100 attack and defense for each banished monster specifically. I think there is a missed opportunity to not include Macrocosmos, since it not only empowers the Primordial Sun, it even special summons it. The other Helios monster is Duo Magestus, which can be special summoned by tributing the Primordial Sun and gains 200 attack and defense for each banished monster. It also has a self-resurrection effect which does not work under Macrocosmos, since it requires the monster to be destroyed as a result of battle and be sent to the graveyard. And, just for completeness, you contribute Duo Magestus for Trice Magestus, which gains 300 attack and defense this time. It also has a slightly improved after battle resurrection effect, and even gains a double attack effect, although it is restricted to just attacking another monster. Yu-Gi-Oh! GX Tag Force brings new support to the Phantom Beast archetype. This is before Horn of the Phantom Beast and way before Dracosac. I believe the only other Phantom Beast cards were Gazelle the King of the Mythical Beasts and Chimera the Flying Mythical Beast. Those cards have since had an erratum, but I am not sure how poorly regionalized cards work in older formats. Can I use Archfiend's Roar to bring back my Summoned Skull and Goat format? I really don't know. Anyway, the new Phantom Beast support is underwhelming. I like how Crosswing and Thunder Pegasus have value in the graveyard, sort of like how Chimera revives one of its materials, which is good consistency in theming at least. The attack gain from Crosswing is nothing special, and Thunder Pegasus battle destruction prevention would be quickly outshined by Necrogardna, and later Shield Warrior, which could protect all your monsters from battle for the turn. Then there's Wildhorn, with piercing battle damage. Enraged Battle Ox has higher defense, the same attack, and gives other monsters piercing battle damage as well. Wildhorn might be strictly worse than Enraged Battle Ox, which is saying something. GX Spirit Caller, not to be confused with the flip effect monster, has some interesting cards. Brain Crusher seems like it could have seen competitive success in very niche situations. It has a Goyo Guardian-like effect, but is level 7. I think the saving grace is the insect typing, though, as the card can be tutored with the ever-underrated insect imitation. Hunter Owl gains 500 attack for being a wind monster, and can form a marauding captain-like lock. Then there is Mass Chopper, which is ridiculous. Does this card finally make Buster Rancher good? Not really, but skipping forward in time, this card is really funny with Moon Mirror Shield. I bet there are some Mass Chopper OTK stories out there, which is just silly to think about. World Championship 2007 gets 2 evaluations for each card. One for the card on release, and one for the present game. You will see why in a minute. Spell Striker is good, just being able to special summon itself from the hand at very low cost. This card is decent tribute fodder, and can get in for some cheeky damage, but the Synchro, Xyz, and especially Link mechanics make the card borderline meta-relevant. Plus that direct damage can steal a tournament game by way of end-of-match procedures. Exploder Dragon is good for the time. Taking down another monster with battle-based removal is okay, but this time with the benefit of not taking battle damage, as compared to the similar DD Warrior Lady. Exiled Force was probably still better, but maybe it is uncharitable to compare Exploder Dragon to cards which hit the FNL list. Printed just after the card was Grave Squirmer, which can hit spells and traps too, but the card is almost completely eclipsed by Bullblader now, which, like the other warriors mentioned, is searchable. Destiny Hero Disc Commander was broken on release. Drawing 2 cards when special summoned from the graveyard is wild, especially when compared to the precursor card, Molten Zombie, or the somewhat similar card, Sacred Crane, which draws the card whenever it is special summoned. Going from 1 card to 2 is doubling the power of the effect, and the warrior typing is a lot easier to work with than the pyro type. Not to mention its position as part of the hero super archetype. Since then, there was an effect-changing erratum, restricting the effect to once per duel, and not even on the turn that the card is sent to the graveyard. At least, Sacred Crane is still good for rank 4 plays. GX Card Almanac is not really a game, more like a card database with some other functionality like life point tracking and the ability to roll virtual dice. To me, it looks like a precursor to Yu-Gi-Oh! Neuron. But back to focusing on the actual cards. Blizzard Dragon has a unique freeze effect to prevent a monster from attacking or changing battle positions. On a decent-sized monster, this card is competitive. Metal Shooter and Death Mosquito are so close to being good. The monsters start with counters to gain attack points, and then remove them to prevent their destruction. Metal Shooter has protection from card effects, while Death Mosquito resists battle destruction. Unfortunately, Metal Shooter needs to be normal summoned to gain the counters, but Death Mosquito gets them whether normal or special summoned. So close to being good design. But at least they are exploring design space with the idea of limited protection. Tag Force Evolution brings another card, which has since had an erratum, this time making the card better. Nurse Reficule the Fallen One, now known as Dark Lord Nurse Reficule, is the centerpiece in Nurse Burn. This card, along with Marie the Fallen One, were poorly translated in regionalization, but they are indeed part of the Dark Lord archetype, making Nurse searchable. The bad reaction to Samuchi effect is a bit game-breaking since it removes the balancing feature of cards like Upstart Goblin, and turns the card into a better Meteor of Destruction, which also draws a card. Needless to say, Nurse is really strong, but not healthy for the game. Supporting Nurse is Dark Cure, which in theory burns the opponent each time they summon a monster, but the card is just bad since it relies on the opponent walking into it. On its own, the card is absolutely awful. Brutal Potion happens to be another equip trap, which can boost a monster by 1000 attack points if you can inflict burn damage to the opponent, and then only until the end of turn, and only once that turn. Meanwhile, Axe of Despair does that unconditionally and is a turn faster. Maybe the theory is that this card is an awkward combat trick, but you're way better off running the then recently released Shrink. World Championship 2008 actually has slightly different cards based on region. All regions got Deep Diver, Burden of the Mighty, and Dimensional Prison. Deep Diver is 2 turns too slow to be useful, since it needs to be destroyed and then places the monster onto the top of the deck. This card is, however, one of the strongest monster tutors in the game, and Adrian used it to fish out an Exodia piece in the anime. At least this can be a fun card in Limited or Cube when the game is much slower. Burden of the Mighty, like Gravity Bind, does not affect Xyz monsters, but even still, losing up to 1000 attack on your boss monster is not that big a deal. It does work well with certain breakpoints where you can attack over a Monarch with a level 4 beatstick, but I think the best word to describe the card is cute, especially with that artwork. Multiple copies can be good though. Then there's Dimensional Prison, which used to be a staple. The card is a huge upgrade over Sakuretsu armor, and was one of the more common out stabiles at the time. Definitely a meta-relevant card, but perhaps one which might have most of its glory days behind it at this point. Japan also got Vortex Trooper, another Adrian card, and one which does not quite stack up to Jaden's Card Trooper, despite also being a cantrip monster. Instead of Vortex Trooper, South Korea got the illegal versions of the Egyptian god cards, which cannot be used in a duel. The last game for the GX era is Tag Force 3, which starts with a surprisingly powerful monster. Gallus the Starbeast can be used in an FTK due to an odd interaction between Kawaki Meru Doom and Jinx ally Birdman, where you can use Birdman to continuously return Gallus to hand, only to special summon it again and again. Gallus actually does burn on its own, so in a 40 monster deck, this can be a 3-card FTK. Red Eyes Wyvern sees a little experimentation now and then, but giving up the normal summon for a telegraphed Red Eyes revival is a pretty steep cost, one which was much more reasonable on release. Then there is Darkness Destroyer, which is a double attacker and deals piercing battle damage. The catch, this card is balanced by having low attack and the inability to be special summoned. If it were a level 6 monster, it might be in the realm worth considering, but not with 2 tribute requirements since it cannot be special summoned. Stick with Brain Crusher instead. I like how the GX promos range in power level from broken to meta-relevant to showing some potential to being just awful. If I had to tier them, they would look something like this. I also took pleasure in the way that so many of the cards had anime relevance. But in the case of Destiny Hero Disc Commander, I think the distribution method caused unnecessary scarcity until the 2011 reprint, at least in the TCG. I am not sure if Konami realized the full potential of the card at that time. It is a shame they dashed those hopes, but I am sure some duelists have nostalgia for the unnerfed Disc Commander. Although Time's arrow may only march forward, thankfully there will always be playgroups indulging in formats of the past.